The music hall was filled with quiet excitement that afternoon. Students, teachers, and guests had gathered for the annual recital at the city's music academy. The grand piano stood at the center of the stage, gleaming under the soft lights polished so well that it reflected the ceiling like a mirror. Conversations buzzed around the room, filled with laughter, nervous whispers, and the sound of piano keys being tested backstage. Everyone looked their best, silk dresses, shining shoes, and confident smiles. But among all the elegant performers, there was one young woman who stood out for a very different reason. She wore a simple, faded dress and a cardigan with a loose button. Her shoes weren't shiny and her hair was tied back in a plain ponytail. Her name was Lily. While others chatted excitedly, Lily sat quietly in the corner, clutching a small notebook filled with handwritten music notes. She didn't have a teacher to accompany her, no group of friends cheering her on. She was there on her own, waiting for her turn to play. Near the stage stood a tall boy named Ethan, the Academy's pride. He had won several awards and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being admired. His friends surrounded him, laughing loudly, talking about who would get the highest score from the judges. When one of them pointed at Lily, Ethan smirked. "Her? She's playing today?" he asked, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I thought this was a music competition, not a beginner's workshop." The group burst out laughing. Lily heard every word, though she tried to keep her eyes on her notebook. Ethan continued, his tone full of mockery. "I've seen her practice once. She doesn't even sit properly at the piano. She looks scared of the keys." A few people glanced at Lily, whispering among themselves. Some smiled awkwardly, not wanting to join in but also not brave enough to speak up for her. Lily felt her chest tighten, her throat dry. She pressed the notebook against her chest, pretending not to care, but inside her heart was pounding. She had been through this before, being underestimated, being judged by how she looked rather than how she played. When her name was called on the list, she could feel every pair of eyes turn toward her. The hall seemed bigger than before and her steps heavier. She walked slowly toward the piano, her fingers trembling slightly. The grand piano looked intimidating, with its black surface shining like still water. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. As she sat on the bench, Ethan's voice reached her again, soft but cutting. "Don't mess up," he said, smirking from the second row. A few quiet laughs followed. Lily's hands froze for a moment above the keys. The judges exchanged small looks, perhaps already expecting little from her. The audience leaned back in their seats, ready to endure what they assumed would be another nervous beginner's attempt. The air was thick with quiet tension. Lily looked down at the keys. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she closed her eyes. Memories began to flash through her mind. Late nights at the small cafe where she used to work, her hands wet from washing dishes, sneaking moments to touch the old upright piano in the corner after everyone had gone home. She remembered the sound of the broken keys, the ones that stuck, the ones that needed gentle pressure. It was there she learned to listen, not just play. Her first piano had not been beautiful like this one. It was scratched, missing 2 white keys and always slightly out of tune. But she loved it. It taught her patience and persistence. She would stay up late, copying notes by candlelight, learning songs by ear because she couldn't afford printed sheets. Those memories, instead of making her sad, filled her with quiet strength. The sound of a cough from the audience pulled her back to the present. She straightened her back and rested her fingers on the keys. The room went silent. Even Ethan, out of curiosity, leaned forward. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Then she pressed one key, a single soft note that lingered in the air. It was warm and deep, vibrating through the room with unexpected clarity. Something about that sound felt alive, like a whisper of something bigger. It wasn't just a note. It was emotion, history, and heart all in one sound. A few people exchanged surprised glances. She hadn't even started her piece yet, but somehow, that single tone carried more feeling than any of the flashy performances before hers. Lily didn't rush. She let the silence stretch, then placed her hands gently over the keys again, ready to continue. But before she began, she glanced briefly at the audience. Her eyes were calm now. She wasn't angry at Ethan, nor was she trying to prove anything. She was there because she loved to play. That simple truth steadied her heart. The next notes came like drops of rain, soft, gentle, but each perfectly placed. Her touch was delicate but confident. The melody slowly filled the hall, and the people who had looked away now couldn't stop watching. The teachers leaned forward, curious. Even the judges who had been writing something down stopped mid-sentence. Ethan's grin faded. He blinked, trying to understand what he was hearing. This wasn't the sound of a nervous student fumbling through a song. It was something else entirely, real music full of emotion. He sat back, suddenly aware of how wrong he had been. Every note Lily played seemed to tell a story. She wasn't playing to impress. She was sharing a part of herself. Her hands moved gracefully, not too fast, not too slow, like she was breathing through the keys. Each chord built upon the last, creating something that pulled everyone closer. For Lily, the stage disappeared. The laughter, the whispers, even the bright lights, they all melted away. She was back in that tiny cafe, her fingers dancing on chipped keys, lost in the beauty of sound. She could almost smell the faint scent of coffee and old wood. Music had always been her escape, and now it was her voice. By the time she reached the soft middle part of her piece, the audience had completely changed. The same people who had giggled before were now silent, their eyes fixed on her hands. Some had tears forming, not because the melody was sad, but because it was pure. It reminded them of something they'd forgotten: humility, honesty, the courage to keep going even when no one believes in you. And though this was only the beginning of her performance, everyone could feel something special taking shape. That single note she started with had opened a door, and through it poured everything she had held inside for years: struggles, pain, love, and hope. When the last soft chord of her opening passage faded, the hall remained completely still. The sound had vanished, but its echo stayed in every heart. Ethan, for the first time, had nothing to say. His smirk was gone, replaced by quiet awe. He glanced at his friends, but they avoided his eyes, embarrassed by their earlier laughter. Lily didn't look up. She wasn't searching for approval. She simply adjusted her posture slightly, took a slow breath, and prepared for the next movement of her song. She didn't know yet how much she had already changed the atmosphere in that hall, how that one note had made people forget to breathe. In that moment, it wasn't about who wore the prettiest dress or who came from the richest family. It wasn't about trophies or certificates. It was about one simple truth, that real music comes from the heart. The crowd didn't clap yet. They were waiting, caught in the spell she had unknowingly cast. The judges sat frozen, and Ethan stared at the piano like it had come alive. And as Lily lifted her fingers again, the room seemed to hold its breath, ready to be taken even deeper into the story her music was about to tell. The sound of the last note still hung in the air like a memory that didn't want to fade. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the next performer's name was called, and the audience broke out of the trance, whispering quietly, exchanging glances that said what words couldn't. But for Lily, the moment was not about applause or silence. As she stood up from the piano bench, her legs felt light, her heart calm. She had done what she came to do. She played from her heart. That was all that mattered. She walked off the stage quietly, clutching her notebook. A few students looked at her differently now. Some smiled politely. Others looked embarrassed for having laughed earlier. She didn't care about their expressions. She just wanted to breathe. Backstage, the dim light flickered above her as she leaned against the wall, listening to the next performer begin. The music was good, technically perfect, but something about it felt empty after what she had just played. Maybe it was because Lily didn't play for perfection. She played for meaning. She remembered sitting in that cafe years ago, the sound of spoons clinking against mugs, the low hum of voices. She would sneak small breaks to play even when she was supposed to be cleaning. The owner, an old man with kind eyes, never stopped her. He would just smile and say, "Play, child." Music should never wait. She had learned to play by ear, repeating songs she heard on the cafe's small radio. At first, her hands shook on the keys, but little by little she grew better. Not because she had lessons or a fancy piano, but because she refused to stop trying. Those memories were warm but also painful. They reminded her of how far she'd come, yet how small she still felt in a place full of people who measured worth by awards and applause. Still, her mother's words always echoed in her mind. It's not about being seen, it's about being true. As she sat quietly in the corner, Ethan appeared near the stage door. His expression had changed. The same boy who laughed at her earlier now looked unsure, like he was carrying a weight he didn't know how to put down. He glanced at her for a moment, opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again and walked away. Lily didn't notice. She was lost in her own thoughts. The recital ended 2 hours later. The judges announced a short break before revealing the results. Students gathered in groups talking about the performances, discussing who might win. Lily sat alone by the window, staring outside at the garden where the evening sun touched the leaves with a soft glow. She didn't expect to win anything. She didn't even stay for the prizes last year, when she played a short piece and left before anyone could comment. This time, though, something felt different. Not because she wanted recognition, but because she felt like she had finally been heard. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "That was beautiful," someone said. She turned to see a young woman from another department, someone she'd never spoken to before. "The way you played," the woman continued, "it made me think of my grandmother. She used to play the same piece, but yours sounded alive." Lily smiled shyly. "Thank you," she said softly. Compliments still made her uneasy, like they didn't belong to her. "I think people didn't expect that from you," the woman said with a kind smile. "You changed the mood of the whole room." Lily just nodded. She didn't know what else to say. After the woman left, she looked down at her hands. Her fingers were still trembling slightly from the performance. The old scars from years of dishwashing were faint now, but still there. Tiny reminders of where she came from. The break ended, and everyone gathered again in the hall. The judges returned to the stage, holding envelopes and score sheets. The audience fell silent as one of them stepped forward. "Today we witnessed remarkable performances," the judge said in a steady voice. "Some showed great technique, others great emotion. But one performance stood out for its honesty and depth." The students began to whisper, glancing at each other. Ethan straightened his back, expecting to hear his name as usual. The judge smiled slightly and said, "The performer who played with heart and soul, capturing not just music but feeling, is Lily." The room went still for a heartbeat, and then a quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Some clapped politely, some genuinely. Ethan's friends looked confused. Lily froze, not sure she had heard right. When the judge gestured for her to come forward, her legs felt heavy. She walked to the stage, trying not to trip. The judge handed her a small certificate and said softly, "Don't ever stop playing the way you did today." The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. Ethan sat motionless, his hands clasped together, eyes lowered. He couldn't ignore what he'd heard anymore. After the ceremony ended, most of the students rushed out, laughing and chatting about the results. Lily remained behind, waiting for the crowd to thin. She stood near the piano again, running her fingers lightly across the keys as if saying goodbye. Ethan finally approached her, his face no longer proud or mocking. "Hey," he said awkwardly, stopping a few steps away. Lily looked up. "Hi," she said simply. He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for words. "About earlier," he began, "I shouldn't have said what I said. I didn't think you'd play like that." Lily gave a small smile. "You didn't have to think anything," she said gently. "It's okay," he shook his head. "No, it's not. I've been competing for years, but what you did today, I've never heard anyone play like that. It made me realize something." She waited quietly, curious. He sighed. "I play to win. You play to feel. That's the difference." For the first time that day, Lily looked him in the eye. "Everyone has their own reason to play," she said softly. "Yours might change someday, too." He nodded slowly. "Maybe it already has." A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but full of understanding. He glanced at the piano. "You made that thing sound like it was alive," he said, half smiling. Lily laughed quietly. "It already is," she replied. "You just have to listen." When she left the hall that evening, the sky was painted in orange and pink. The street was quiet, and the cool wind brushed against her face. She walked home with her notebook tucked under her arm, feeling lighter than she had in months. At home, her mother was waiting by the window. The small apartment smelled of bread and tea. "You're late," her mother said, but her voice was gentle. Lily smiled. It was a long day. Her mother looked at her carefully, noticing the calm glow in her eyes. "You played well, didn't you?" Lily hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "And I think people finally listened." Her mother reached out and touched her hand. "They will always listen," she said softly, "when it comes from the heart." That night, Lily sat by the window, her old notebook open in front of her. She wrote new notes on the blank pages, soft melodies she had been carrying in her head for months. For the first time, she wasn't writing to prove anything. She was writing because she couldn't imagine a world without sound. Across town, Ethan sat at his piano staring at the keys. His trophies lined the wall, but for the first time, they didn't matter. He played a few random notes, but they sounded hollow. Then he closed his eyes and tried to remember how Lily's first note had felt. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. He played again, slower this time, trying to find that same honesty. In that small moment, without either of them knowing, something had changed for both. One had found her voice, the other had found humility. And though the recital was over, the echo of that one note still lived quietly in every corner of the hall, waiting for the next time someone brave enough would sit at the piano and let their soul speak instead of their pride. The next morning, the city was still covered in a soft fog when Lily woke up. Her small room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. She rubbed her eyes and sat up slowly, feeling a strange mix of peace and disbelief. The events from the night before kept replaying in her head. The lights, the piano, the silence that followed her last note. It didn't feel real yet. For so long she had played in empty rooms where no one listened, and now people were finally talking about her performance. Her mother knocked lightly on the door and peeked in. "You're awake early," she said with a smile. "I couldn't sleep much," Lily replied. My mind kept replaying everything. Her mother set a cup of tea on the table beside her. "That's what happens when dreams start to come true," she said softly. "They keep you awake," Lily smiled faintly. "It wasn't a dream, was it?" Her mother shook her head. "No, it wasn't. You earned it." After breakfast, Lily got ready to go back to the academy. Classes would continue as usual, but something inside her felt different. She wasn't nervous anymore. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged there, not because of what others thought, but because she knew what she could do. When she arrived, the hallways buzzed with chatter. Everyone seemed to know her name now. Some students she had never spoken to smiled as she walked by. A few even stopped to say how much they loved her performance. She thanked them politely, still a bit shy, still unsure how to handle the attention. But not everyone was kind. A group of students whispered as she passed. "She just got lucky," one of them said. "The judges always like emotional stuff. It doesn't mean she's better." Another added, "Let's see if she can do it again. One song doesn't make her special." Lily heard every word, but she didn't let it sink in. She knew how easy it was for people to forget kindness when jealousy took over. She went straight to the practice room and sat at the old upright piano in the corner. The keys were uneven and some slightly out of tune, but that didn't bother her. She had played worse. As her fingers touched the keys, she closed her eyes and began to play softly. The notes flowed like a stream, calm and steady. Music was her way of escaping the noise around her, her way of speaking without words. After a few minutes, she felt someone standing at the door. When she turned, Ethan was there, holding a small folder under his arm. He looked hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he should interrupt. "Hey," he said quietly. Lily smiled faintly. "Hi." He stepped inside and leaned against the wall. "You're here early," he said. "I like the mornings," she replied. "The piano sounds softer when it's quiet." Ethan nodded, watching her fingers move. "You're really good," he said. I knew it last night, but seeing you play up close, it's different." Lily looked at him curiously. "You play too, don't you?" "Yeah," he said, a bit awkwardly. "But lately it doesn't feel the same. I practiced for hours last night, but nothing sounded right." She smiled gently. "Maybe you're thinking too much." "Music doesn't like pressure." He laughed softly. "You make it sound simple." "It is," she said. "You just have to stop worrying about what people expect and start listening to what you want to say." Her words stayed with him. He didn't reply for a moment. Instead, he watched her play again, feeling something stir inside him, something that reminded him why he had started playing years ago, before trophies and competitions took over his heart. When she finished, Ethan asked, "Would you maybe want to play together sometime?" Lily looked surprised. "Together?" He nodded quickly. "Yeah, I think I could learn something from you." Lily thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said, "but only if you promise not to treat it like a competition." He grinned. "Deal." That afternoon, they met again in the main hall when everyone had left. The stage was empty and the lights above gave the place a golden glow. Lily sat on one side of the piano bench, Ethan on the other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was strange at first, sitting beside someone she once thought of as arrogant, but as they began to play, just a few simple notes at first, the awkwardness disappeared. Their hands moved differently. Ethan's touch was sharp and controlled. Lily's was soft and emotional. At first their styles clashed, but slowly something magical began to happen. They started to blend, their notes weaving together like threads in a fabric. Ethan adjusted his rhythm to match her feeling, and she met his precision halfway. Together they created a melody that was both structured and full of heart. When they finished, the last note hung in the air between them. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Ethan let out a slow breath. "That it felt right," he said. Lily smiled. "Because you stopped thinking about winning," she said quietly. He chuckled. "Maybe you're right." Over the next few weeks, they began to meet regularly after classes. Sometimes they practiced duets. Other times, they just talked. Lily learned that Ethan wasn't as proud as he seemed. He was just afraid of not being enough. He had grown up in a family where success was the only language people understood. Every mistake felt like a failure, every loss like shame. But when he played with Lily, that pressure seemed to melt away. One day, as they practiced, a teacher walked by and stopped to listen. "That was beautiful," she said after they finished. "We're organizing a charity concert next month. Would you two like to perform together?" Ethan looked at Lily, unsure. "What do you think?" he asked. Lily hesitated. She had never performed in front of such a big audience before. The thought made her nervous. But then she remembered how it felt the night of the recital, the calm that came when she let go of fear. She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "Let's do it." The weeks leading up to the concert were full of preparation. They spent hours choosing pieces, adjusting harmonies, and finding their rhythm. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they laughed, but through it all, they grew closer, not just as musicians, but as people who had started to understand each other. One evening, after a long rehearsal, they sat outside the academy steps watching the sunset. The air was cool and still. Ethan broke the silence. "You know," he said, "I used to think playing piano was about being perfect, about proving something. But when I hear you play, I realize it's about being honest." Lily smiled. "Honesty is harder than perfection," she said, "because it means showing who you really are." He nodded slowly. "You've changed the way I see music," she laughed softly. "Music changed me first." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat quietly, listening to the faint sound of a student practicing somewhere in the distance. It was a simple moment, but both of them felt something shift, an invisible connection that would follow them into that concert and beyond. When the charity event finally arrived, the hall was packed. The stage lights shone brighter than before, and the air buzzed with excitement. People from all over the city had come to hear the students perform. Lily stood backstage, her heart pounding. She looked at Ethan, who gave her a reassuring nod. "Ready?" he asked. She smiled nervously. "As ready as I'll ever be." When they stepped onto the stage, the applause washed over them like a wave. Lily took her seat, hands trembling slightly. Then she looked at Ethan. He smiled, and somehow that was enough to calm her. The first few notes were soft, uncertain, but soon the music took over. Their fingers moved in perfect harmony, creating a sound that filled every corner of the hall. The melody rose and fell like a story being told without words, two hearts speaking in the same language. As they played, the audience leaned forward, captured by the beauty of it. Some closed their eyes. Others sat motionless, afraid to miss a single sound. When the final note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the applause began, loud, genuine, full of emotion. Lily looked at Ethan, who grinned widely. She smiled back, her heart swelling with gratitude. It wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about sharing something real. And as they stood to bow together, the lights shining down on them, Lily realized that one note, one performance, had started something much bigger, a journey not just of music, but of understanding, courage, and the quiet power of believing in yourself even when no one else does. The night after the concert, Lily couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see the bright lights, the smiling faces in the crowd, and the sound of the applause that had seemed to last forever. It didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt like a turning point, something that had changed her life in quiet but powerful ways. She kept replaying the performance in her mind, especially the moment when she and Ethan had played that last chord together. It had felt like two worlds blending into one. Outside her window, the city was silent except for the distant hum of passing cars. Her piano sat near the wall, bathed in the pale light of the moon. She stood up, walked over, and touched the keys gently. Her fingers moved without thinking, playing a few soft notes that echoed through the room. For the first time, she wasn't practicing for anyone. Not for the judges, not for her classmates, not even for herself. She was just playing to feel alive. At the same time, across town, Ethan sat at his own piano, staring at the same moonlight through his window. His trophies gleamed in the corner, but he didn't look at them anymore. He had started to understand that they weren't what made him happy. What stayed with him was the sound of that duet, the way their music had filled the hall with something real. He played a few chords quietly, trying to capture that same warmth, that same truth, but the feeling only came when he stopped thinking and let his heart take over. The next morning, Lily arrived at the academy early as usual, but this time people greeted her differently. Teachers smiled at her in the hallway, students nodded respectfully, and even the receptionist stopped her to say, "That concert was unforgettable. You have something special." She thanked them politely, her cheeks flushing with quiet pride. For years she had walked through those same halls unnoticed. Now people were beginning to see her, not because she had tried to be seen, but because she had stayed true to herself. When she reached the practice room, Ethan was already there, sitting at the piano. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "You're early," he said. "So are you," she replied, setting her notebook on the stand. He shrugged. Couldn't wait to play again. They spent the morning practicing new pieces, but their laughter filled the room more than the sound of the piano. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about joy. Even when they made mistakes, they laughed and kept going. After a while, their teacher walked in quietly and listened for a few minutes before speaking. "You two have something rare," she said. "It's not just talent, it's connection. Don't lose that." Her words stayed with them for the rest of the day. Later, as they sat outside under a tree in the courtyard, Ethan said softly, "You know, before I met you, I used to think music was about competition, but now I see it's about conversation. When we play together, it feels like we're talking without words." Lily nodded. "Music speaks what words can't." He looked at her thoughtfully. "What does it say for you?" She paused for a moment. "It says, 'I'm still here,'" she said quietly. "No matter how hard things get, I can still play. And as long as I can play, I'm okay." Ethan smiled gently. "That's beautiful." Over the next few weeks, their friendship deepened. They started helping other students who were struggling with their music, offering small lessons after class. Lily had a way of encouraging people that made them believe in themselves. She never criticized harshly. She always found something good to point out. Ethan admired that about her. He realized that while he had learned technique from his teachers, he had learned compassion from her. But as the days went on, something unexpected happened. The academy announced an upcoming regional competition, one of the biggest events of the year. The winner would receive a scholarship to study abroad. Ethan had competed in it before and won second place once. Everyone expected him to enter again. When the list of participants was posted, his name was there, as well as Lily's. For a moment, Ethan stared at the paper in surprise. He hadn't expected her to join. Lily, who was standing beside him, looked nervous. "I wasn't sure if I should sign up," she said softly. "But I thought maybe it's time to try." He hesitated, not knowing what to say. Part of him was proud of her courage. Another part of him felt uneasy. The same competition that had once fueled his ego was now something he didn't want to lose for the wrong reasons. Over the next days, the atmosphere between them changed slightly. They still practiced together, but there was a quiet tension neither of them mentioned. Ethan couldn't help but notice how beautifully she played, how her emotions seemed to draw people in. The thought of competing against her made him uncomfortable, not because he wanted to beat her, but because he didn't want to lose something more valuable than a trophy, their friendship. One afternoon, while they were rehearsing, he stopped mid-song and looked at her. "What happens if one of us wins?" he asked. Lily looked at him puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if it changes things between us?" She smiled gently. "It won't," she said. "Music isn't about beating each other. It's about growing together." Her calm voice settled his nerves, but deep inside, He still feared that the competition might test them in ways they weren't ready for. When the day of the regional event arrived, the hall was larger than any they had performed in before. The air buzzed with excitement and nerves. Participants from different schools filled the seats backstage, each clutching their sheet music tightly. Lily sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, whispering the melody of her piece under her breath. Ethan was nearby, trying to look calm but feeling the pressure build inside him. Before the show began, he walked over to her. "No matter what happens," he said softly, "promise we'll still play together after this." Lily smiled and nodded. "Promise." Ethan performed first. His fingers moved flawlessly, his expression focused. The audience clapped loudly when he finished. It was everything a perfect performance should be: polished, powerful, confident. Yet as he stepped off stage, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Then it was Lily's turn. She walked to the piano, her steps slow but steady. The hall fell silent. When she began to play, it was as if time stopped. Her music wasn't loud or dramatic, but it carried a kind of honesty that reached straight into people's hearts. Each note was soft, full of life and emotion. By the time she finished, there were tears in more than a few eyes. Even the judges sat quietly for a moment before clapping. Ethan, standing in the wings, felt something deep stir inside him: admiration, pride, and maybe a touch of sadness. He realized that winning didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she had shared something real. When the results were announced, Lily had won first place. The room erupted with applause. Ethan was named runner-up, but instead of disappointment, he felt a strange sense of peace. He walked up to her after the ceremony, smiling sincerely. "You deserved it," he said. "Every bit of it." Lily shook her head. "We both did. You helped me get here." He laughed softly. "Maybe. But you reminded me why I started playing in the first place." They stood together, surrounded by noise and celebration. But in that moment, everything felt quiet. There was no rivalry, no pride, just understanding. As they left the hall that evening, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Lily looked up and said softly, "Do you ever think about how music connects people who might never have spoken otherwise?" Ethan nodded. "All the time," he said. "And I'm glad it connected us," she smiled. "Me too." They walked side by side down the street, the sound of distant piano music drifting from an open window somewhere nearby. And though they didn't say it out loud, they both knew that what had begun as a simple performance had grown into something deeper. A friendship built not on competition, but on trust, kindness, and the shared language of music that would keep their hearts in tune long after the applause had faded. A few weeks after the competition, life at the academy slowly returned to normal. But for Lily and Ethan, nothing felt quite the same anymore. The hallways that once echoed with practice sessions and hurried footsteps now seemed to hold a quiet memory of that unforgettable performance. People still spoke about it sometimes, especially the way Lily had played. Her name was on everyone's lips, and while she was grateful for the attention, it made her a little uncomfortable. She had never wanted fame. She only wanted to share something true through her music. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself in a new space emotionally. For the first time, he wasn't chasing perfection or applause. Watching Lily win had taught him something important. Music wasn't about being better than someone else. It was about being real. Still, there were moments when he felt a small sting inside, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was pride mixed with longing, or maybe it was just change catching up to him. One morning, as Lily sat in the music room practicing alone, Ethan walked in quietly. She didn't notice him at first. Her hands moved softly across the keys, playing a melody he hadn't heard before. It was gentle, like a whisper, but full of emotion. When she finished, she turned and smiled. "You were listening," she said. "I couldn't help it," he replied, smiling back. "That was beautiful. Did you write it?" She nodded. "It's something I've been working on. I call it between two notes." He tilted his head. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said softly, "sometimes the most beautiful part of music isn't the note itself, but the silence between them. That little pause when your heart holds its breath." Ethan thought about her words for a moment and then sat beside her. "You always find beauty in the quiet things," he said. "That's where the truth usually hides," she replied. From that day, they started meeting more often, not to practice for competitions, but just to play. Sometimes they would choose random songs and turn them into duets. Other times they would sit by the window, talk about life, or listen to the rain hitting the glass. Their bond grew stronger, rooted in understanding rather than ambition. But not everyone saw it that way. A few students at the academy began whispering behind their backs. Some said Lily had become famous only because of Ethan's help, while others accused her of being lucky rather than talented. At first she ignored it. She had dealt with judgment before. But as the whispers grew louder, they began to sting. One afternoon after class, she overheard two students laughing near the piano room. "She's good, but let's be honest," one said. "She wouldn't have even entered that competition if Ethan hadn't pushed her." "She got lucky." Lily froze, the words cutting deep. She quietly stepped away before they could see her. That evening she went home and didn't touch the piano at all. The next day Ethan noticed something was wrong. She didn't greet him with her usual smile, and her playing seemed distant, mechanical. "Hey," he said gently after their practice. "What's going on? You've been quiet all day." She hesitated, then sighed. "People think I only won because of you. That I didn't deserve it," Ethan frowned. "You know that's not true." "I know," she said softly, "but hearing it still hurts." He reached out and touched her shoulder. "Let them talk. You don't owe them an explanation. You earned everything with your own hands." His words comforted her, but the doubt lingered in her heart. That night she sat by her piano again, staring at the keys without playing. She remembered all those years of practicing in silence. The nights she stayed up until her fingers ached. The times she almost gave up but didn't. Slowly, she placed her hands on the piano and began to play between two notes. The melody filled the room like a soft breeze. It reminded her of who she was before the applause, before the recognition, just a girl who loved music enough to never stop playing. Meanwhile, Ethan had his own challenges. His mentor had invited him to audition for a prestigious orchestra program in another city. It was a big opportunity, one that could change his career. But accepting it meant leaving the academy and Lily behind. He hadn't told her yet. A few days later, while they were sitting together after class, he finally spoke up. "There's something I need to tell you," he said carefully. Lily looked at him curious. "What is it?" "I got invited to audition for the Harmony Orchestra," he said. "It's in another city. The audition's in 2 weeks." Her eyes widened. "That's incredible, Ethan. You have to go." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, but if I get in, I'll have to move there." The words hung in the air like a heavy note. Neither of them spoke for a while. Lily finally said softly, "You should go. You've worked so hard for this." Ethan looked at her, searching her face. "And what about us? The music we make together?" She smiled sadly. "It doesn't end just because you go somewhere else. Music doesn't belong to a place. It lives in the people who believe in it." He nodded, but deep inside he didn't want to leave. The thought of walking into a practice room without her laughter or her quiet wisdom felt empty. The days leading up to his audition passed quickly. They spent most of their time together, playing, talking, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. One evening, Lily surprised him by handing him a small notebook. "What's this?" he asked. "Your own compositions," she said with a shy smile. "Every piece we worked on together, I wrote them down for you. Maybe they'll bring you luck." He flipped through the pages, each one filled with neat handwriting and little notes in the margins. "This is amazing," he said quietly. "Thank you. Just promise me one thing," she said softly. "No matter where you go, don't forget why you play." He smiled. "I promise." When the day of the audition arrived, Lily couldn't come with him. But she sent him a message that morning. "Play with your heart, not your hands." Ethan carried those words with him as he stepped onto the stage. The hall was quiet, filled with judges and strangers. For a moment, nerves tightened his chest, but then he thought of her. He thought of their duets, of the laughter, of the time she reminded him that music wasn't about perfection. He took a deep breath and began to play. The notes flowed like water, smooth and full of life. Every key he touched carried a piece of their story. When he finished, the judges looked moved. He knew, even before they spoke, that he had played his best. A week later, he received the results. He had been accepted. The letter was clear. He would need to move within a month. That evening, he went to find Lily at the academy. She was in the music room, as always. When he told her the news, she smiled warmly, even though her heart ached a little. "I knew you'd make it," she said. He tried to smile too, but his voice was low. "I wish you could come with me." She shook her head gently. We all have our own paths, but one day those paths meet again in the music we play. They stood there in silence for a long moment, the piano between them. Then Ethan said, "Play something for me, one last time before I go." Lily nodded and began to play between two notes. The melody filled the room with bittersweet beauty. Ethan closed his eyes, listening to every sound, memorizing it like a memory he never wanted to lose. When she finished, she looked up and smiled faintly. "Now it's your turn," she whispered. He sat beside her and placed his hands on the keys. Together they played their duet, the same one that had changed everything months ago. The room glowed in the golden light of sunset, and for a moment, nothing else existed. When the last note faded, they sat in silence, their hearts full and heavy at the same time. The next morning, Ethan left for the city. He looked out of the train window as the landscape passed by, the small town growing smaller in the distance. He carried the notebook Lily had given him in his bag, and in his heart, the melody of their final duet. Back at the academy, Lily returned to her quiet routine. But now every time she played, it felt like he was still there beside her. She would close her eyes and imagine their music blending once more, not as rivals or students, but as two souls connected through the language only they could understand. And though miles separated them, their music traveled farther than either of them could see, reaching hearts, telling stories and whispering the truth they both had discovered, that sometimes one note is enough to change everything, and that even silence can sing when it carries the memory of a song once shared. Years passed, but the memory of that final duet never faded from Lily's mind. The room they had once practiced in still looked the same worn piano bench, the same old metronome on the shelf. But the air felt quieter now. She had stayed at the academy, teaching younger students and helping them find their own love for music. Her life was simple and calm, but whenever she played alone, she could still feel Ethan's presence beside her, as if the air itself remembered their melody. Every evening after her classes were done, Lily would sit by the window of the small apartment she now lived in. She had filled it with books, flowers, and one thing she could never part with, her piano. The wood had grown darker over the years, but the keys still carried that familiar touch. Sometimes she would play softly into the night, and the neighbors would pause to listen, unaware of the story her music carried, a story of friendship, courage, and unspoken promises. One day, while sorting through her old things, Lily found the little notebook she had once given Ethan. Her handwriting filled the pages, and in the corner of the first one she had written, "For the music we made together." She smiled faintly, tracing the letters with her fingertips. She wondered where Ethan was now, whether he had stayed with the orchestra, whether he still remembered their duets. That same week, she received a letter with a postmark from another city. The handwriting on the envelope was instantly familiar. Her heart skipped as she tore it open carefully. It began simply, "Dear Lily, I don't know if this letter will reach you, but I hope it does. I've been traveling with the orchestra for the past few years. We've played in places I never thought I'd see. But no matter where I go, every time I sit at the piano, I still hear your voice reminding me, play with your heart, not your hands. There's a concert in your city next month. It would mean a lot to me if you came. It's not just any concert, it's my farewell one. After this, I plan to return home. Maybe we can meet again and maybe play one more song together." It was signed simply, E. For a long moment, Lily just sat there, the letter trembling slightly in her hands. She couldn't stop smiling. After all the years, after all the distance, he still remembered. As the concert date drew near, she found herself more nervous than she'd been in years. She chose a simple dress, nothing fancy, and walked to the concert hall early. The crowd was larger than she'd expected. People from all over had come to see Ethan's final performance. She found a seat near the front, her heart beating fast. When the lights dimmed and the stage brightened, he walked out. Older, more composed, but unmistakably the same Ethan she'd known. The crowd erupted in applause, but Lily didn't clap right away. She just watched him, trying to hold back the emotion rising in her chest. He sat down at the piano, adjusted the seat, and for a moment, just looked at the keys. Then, without a word, he began to play. The melody filled the room instantly. It was gentle, like the start of a conversation between two souls who hadn't spoken in years. As the music grew, Lily realized she knew this tune. It was Between Two Notes, the piece she had written long ago. Tears welled in her eyes. He had remembered, not just the melody, but every small pause, every tender silence. The way he played it was soft and full of memory, as though every note carried a message meant only for her. When the last chord faded, the hall went silent for a long second, then erupted in applause. Ethan stood, bowed, and looked toward the audience. His eyes searched the crowd, and then he found her. Their eyes met. He smiled. After the concert, she waited by the backstage door. When he finally appeared, still in his black suit, carrying his music folder, they just stood there for a moment, neither saying anything. Then he laughed softly and said, "You came?" "Of course," she said. "You didn't think I'd miss it, did you?" He shook his head. "I hoped you wouldn't." For a while, they just walked around the quiet courtyard behind the hall. The air was cool, the city lights glowing softly around them. It felt like no time had passed at all. "So you're really coming back?" Lily asked. "Yes," he said. "I've been thinking about it for a long time." Touring was exciting, but somewhere along the way I realized I missed the kind of music we used to play. "The kind that meant something," she nodded. "Music that comes from the heart," he smiled. "Exactly." They stopped walking, and Ethan looked at her seriously. "You know, every time I performed these past years, people would ask me where I learned to play like that. I always said, from someone who taught me to listen." Lily looked down, a small smile on her lips. "You always did exaggerate." "I'm not exaggerating this time," he said softly. "You changed how I see music. You made me feel it." The silence between them felt warm, like the quiet moment before the first note of a song. Ethan reached into his bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "I brought this for you," he said. When she unwrapped it, she gasped. It was the same notebook she had given him years ago, but now it was full. Page after page filled with his handwriting, new melodies and notes scribbled in the margins. "I added to it," he said. "Every city I played in, I wrote something. It's yours now." Her eyes shimmered. "Thank you," she whispered. They went back to her apartment that evening, where her old piano still stood by the window. The room smelled faintly of jasmine and coffee. Ethan ran his hand over the piano keys, smiling. "Still sounds the same," he said. Lily laughed. "I've kept it alive." He sat down, patted the seat beside him, and said, "Let's see if we still remember how to play together." She joined him, and for a moment, the world seemed to disappear. Their fingers found the rhythm naturally, like no time had passed. The melody they created was new yet familiar. It carried pieces of their past and hints of their future. When they finished, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, smiling quietly. Later, as they drank tea by the window, Ethan looked out at the city lights and said, "You know, I used to think the most important part of life was reaching the top. But now I see. It's about who stands beside you while you climb." Lily nodded. "And who keeps you grounded when you do." He looked at her, eyes full of calm understanding. "I'm not leaving again," he said simply. "There's still music left for us to write." That night they stayed up late, talking about old memories, forgotten dreams, and the quiet strength that had kept them going. The next morning, as sunlight spilled through the window, Ethan was still there, sitting at the piano, gently humming the tune they'd just written. Lily walked over, smiled, and said, "That sounds like a beginning." He looked up. "Maybe it is." Weeks turned into months, and their partnership blossomed again. Only this time, it wasn't about proving anything. They began teaching together at the academy, inspiring students not just to play but to feel. Their classes were always full, not because of fame, but because their warmth drew people in. Their music reached far beyond the classroom. They started composing together again, writing songs about life, loss, hope, and the power of small moments. And every time they performed, people said there was something different about their sound, something honest and alive. One evening, after a small concert, a student approached them shyly and said, "When you two play, it feels like you're telling a story that never ends." Lily and Ethan smiled at each other. "That's the best kind of story," Ethan said. Years later, when people spoke about them, they didn't just remember their skill, they remembered their kindness, their connection, and the way they made others believe in the beauty of imperfection. In the end, Their music became more than notes and chords. It became a reminder of everything they had learned, that sometimes the people who challenge us the most become the ones who understand us best, and that the most powerful melodies are born not from fame or fear, but from friendship and truth. And though time moved forward, their story stayed alive in every piano key that echoed through the academy halls. The world around them changed. Students came and went, but whenever the soft sound of a duet filled the room, everyone knew. It was their music that still lingered in the air, a song that would never truly end.